Welcome, dear viewers, to Mr. Shadow's Stories, where the darkness whispers secrets that daylight dares not reveal. I am your guide through the corridors of terror, the keeper of tales that crawl beneath your skin and nest in the corners of your mind. Tonight, we venture into places where the living pass through, but sometimes what passes through never truly leaves. So dim your lights, silence your world, and let the shadows speak. Airports. We think of them as gateways, portals to adventure, reunion, and new beginnings. Millions of souls pass through these vast terminals every single day, their footsteps echoing through endless corridors, their voices blending into a symphony of human movement. But what happens when the last flight departs? When the crowds dissipate like morning fog? When the fluorescent lights hum their lonely tune over empty gates and abandoned security checkpoints? Those who work the night shift know a different airport entirely. An airport that transforms after midnight, where shadows stretch longer, where every sound carries an echo of something else. The janitors, the security guards, the maintenance workers, they see what passengers never do. They walk through terminals that feel more like mausoleums than transportation hubs. And sometimes, just sometimes, they encounter things that make them question everything they thought they knew about the boundary between our world and whatever lies beyond. Tonight, I bring you 3 true stories from airport night shift workers. Stories they've carried with them. Stories that have changed them forever. Stories that will make you think twice about those empty terminals you might glimpse through airplane windows during late-night layovers. These are their confessions. These are their nightmares. And now, they're yours too. Story 1. The Woman at Gate 43. Our first story comes from Marcus, a security guard who worked at a major international airport in the southeastern United States for 7 years. Marcus was a veteran, someone who'd seen it all, or so he thought. He dealt with drunk passengers, medical emergencies, suspicious packages, and everything in between. Nothing fazed him, nothing scared him, until the night he met the woman at Gate 43. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of night where autumn's chill creeps through even the most well-heated buildings. Marcus was on his usual patrol route, checking the international terminal gates around 3:47 a.m. The last flight had departed 3 hours earlier. The cleaning crews had already swept through. The terminal was his alone, a vast cathedral-like space of polished floors and silent monitors displaying destinations to nowhere. Gate 43 was at the far end of Concourse D, an older section of the airport that always felt colder than the rest. The fluorescent lights there flickered occasionally, casting unstable shadows that danced across the empty seats. Marcus approached with his flashlight, performing the standard security sweep. That's when he saw her. A woman sat in the waiting area, perfectly still, facing the massive windows that looked out onto the dark tarmac. She wore what appeared to be a vintage travel outfit, a navy blue suit with a small pillbox hat, the kind you might see in photographs from the 1960s. Her posture was unnaturally rigid, hands folded precisely in her lap, a small suitcase beside her feet. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. No passengers should be in this area. The terminal was closed. The doors were locked. How did she get past security? "Ma'am," Marcus called out, his voice echoing strangely in the empty space. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me." The woman didn't move, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge him at all. Marcus approached closer, his hand instinctively moving to his radio. As he got within 10 feet of her, the temperature dropped noticeably. His breath began to fog in the air. The lights overhead flickered more intensely, and he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The woman cast no reflection in the massive windows before her. The windows reflected the empty terminal, the rows of seats, even Marcus himself standing there. But where the woman sat, there was nothing, just empty space. "Ma'am, I need you to respond," Marcus said, his voice now betraying a slight tremor. He reached out to touch her shoulder. His hand passed through, not through solid matter that suddenly wasn't there, but through a resistance like cold water, a thickness in the air that made his fingers tingle and burn with an icy sensation that shot up his entire arm. The woman's head turned then, slowly, mechanically, until she faced him directly. Marcus will never forget what he saw. Her face was beautiful but wrong, features too perfect, too symmetrical, like a porcelain doll. But her eyes were completely black, not just the pupils, but the entire eye, like pools of liquid darkness. And when she smiled, revealing teeth that were just slightly too white, too perfect, she spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "My flight has been delayed for 63 years. Marcus stumbled backwards, his radio falling from his belt and clattering across the floor. The woman stood up in one fluid motion, no natural joint movement, as if she were being pulled upright by invisible strings. She took a step towards him, and with each step, the lights around them began to go out in sequence, darkness chasing them back to the main terminal. Marcus ran. He'd never admit this to anyone except his closest friends, but he ran as if his life depended on it. Behind him, he could hear the clicking of heels on the polished floor, keeping perfect pace with him no matter how fast he sprinted. The clicking was accompanied by humming, a lullaby from another era, distorted and wrong. Marcus burst through the doors into the main terminal, and the clicking stopped. When he finally gathered the courage to look back, the corridor behind him was empty. The lights had returned to normal, but at the far end, Gate 43 was completely dark, as if the power had been cut exclusively to that area. Marcus called for backup. 3 other guards responded. Together, they approached Gate 43 with flashlights and considerable trepidation. The area was empty, completely empty. But on the seat where the woman had been sitting, they found something that made Marcus request a transfer to the day shift the very next morning. It was an old airline boarding pass, yellowed with age, brittle to the touch. The date on it was October 17th, 1962. The destination was never reached. The flight number matched a commercial aircraft that had crashed on takeoff exactly 63 years that very night, killing all 47 passengers. The woman's name on the boarding pass was Eleanor Vance, seat 43A. Marcus never worked a night shift again, and Gate 43, the airport administration quietly retired it from use, claiming structural concerns. But the night shift workers know better. They know why that gate is always dark. They know why no one patrols that end of Concourse D alone. And sometimes, late at night, you can still hear the faint clicking of heels and the distant humming of a lullaby from 1962.
Story 2: The Luggage That Came Back. Our second story takes us to the bowels of the airport, literally. The underground baggage handling system is a labyrinth of conveyor belts, sorting machines, and storage areas that most passengers never see or think about. This is where David worked as a baggage handler on the graveyard shift at a busy West Coast airport. David's job was straightforward: process late-night cargo, handle misrouted luggage, and ensure the system was ready for the morning's first flights. He usually worked alone down there from midnight to 6 a.m., accompanied only by the mechanical grinding of conveyor belts and the occasional thud of a bag being sorted. The incident happened on a February night, unseasonably cold and foggy. David was doing his routine inspection of the carousel system when he noticed a single bag circling endlessly on Belt 7, a section that shouldn't have been active at all. It was an old-fashioned trunk, the kind made of hard leather with metal corners and buckles, covered in vintage travel stickers from exotic locations: Cairo, Istanbul, Singapore, Marrakesh. Strange, David thought. Belt 7 handled international arrivals, but the last international flight had landed 6 hours ago. Everything should have been cleared by the evening shift. He approached to remove the trunk and send it to Lost and Found. As he reached for it, he felt a vibration, not from the machinery around him, but from inside the trunk itself, a rhythmic thumping like a heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. David stepped back, his mouth suddenly dry. Probably just something inside that got jostled, he told himself. Maybe a mechanical toy or some device that got activated. He reached for his radio to call his supervisor. That's when the trunk moved. Not fell or shifted, moved. It rocked slightly from side to side, as if something inside was trying to orient itself. The thumping grew louder, more insistent. Thump, 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 thump. Jesus, whispered David, backing away further. The logical part of his brain screamed animal. Someone's pet got loose in luggage. But another part of him, a primal part that existed long before logic, knew this was something else entirely. The latches clicked open by themselves. One by one, each buckle unfastened with a metallic snap that echoed through the underground chamber. David wanted to run, wanted to call for help, wanted to do anything except stand there, frozen, watching as the lid slowly began to rise. The smell hit him first. Old air, stale and thick, carrying scents of mothballs and decay and something sweet and rotten underneath. The lid opened fully, and David's flashlight beam illuminated the interior. It was empty, completely empty, just faded silk lining and the musty age of air. David laughed nervously, the tension breaking. His imagination had run wild. It was just an old trunk, probably from some vintage luggage collection, accidentally placed on the belt by a confused baggage handler of an earlier shift. He moved to close the lid, and that's when he saw it. In the silk lining, something was moving, not on the surface, beneath the fabric itself. Bulges that formed, moved, and disappeared. Then they began to take shape. Faces,
human faces pressed against the silk as if it were a membrane between worlds, their features distorted, mouths open in silent screams. David stumbled backward, knocking over his coffee mug and crashing into the conveyor belt behind him. The faces in the trunk multiplied, dozens, hundreds, pressing and clawing and trying to break through. And then came the hands, pale, translucent hands, reaching up from the impossible depths of a trunk that should have been only 2 feet deep, but now seemed bottomless. A sound emerged from the trunk, not words exactly, but a chorus of whispers in dozens of languages, all speaking at once, all pleading, all demanding. David covered his ears, but the sound wasn't just external, it was inside his head, vibrating through his skull. He ran for the emergency exit, slamming through the door and up the stairs to the main terminal level. He didn't stop running until he reached the security office, where he burst through the doors, gasping and pale, nearly incoherent. 2 security guards accompanied him back down to the baggage level. The trunk was gone. Belt 7 was stationary and empty. David insisted on checking the security footage. Together they reviewed the recordings. The footage showed David approaching the belt, standing still for approximately 47 seconds while staring at empty space, then suddenly backing away from nothing, knocking over his coffee and running. There was no trunk, no bag, nothing on the belt at all. But David knows what he saw, what he felt, what he heard, and he's not alone. After that night, he started asking around, talking to other long-time employees. Turns out the trunk has appeared before, always on Belt 7, always during the graveyard shift, always to someone working alone. An old-timer in maintenance told him the legend. In 1978, a baggage handler named Raymond Ellis disappeared during his shift. He was never found. The only thing left behind was his watch and a pool of blood near Belt 7. They searched everywhere, the entire baggage system, the tunnels, every storage room. Nothing. 3 weeks after his disappearance, his trunk showed up on Belt 7, the same trunk he'd used for a trip to Europe the month before. When they opened it, his clothes were inside, neatly folded, but there was blood on them, fresh blood, and carved into the leather lining, over and over in tiny letters, were the words, "Still traveling, still traveling, still traveling." David transferred to the day shift. He won't go near the baggage level anymore. And when he sees vintage trunks in movies or antique shops, he has to look away, because in his nightmares, the trunk still opens, the faces still press against the silk, and the hands still reach out, trying to pull him down into whatever endless journey they're on. Our final story comes from Jennifer, a custodial worker at a major hub airport in the Midwest. Jennifer was known among her co-workers as unshakable. She worked efficiently, methodically, and had cleaned up things that would make most people quit. Biological hazards, security incidents, you name it, Jennifer had seen it and cleaned it up without complaint. Terminal 3 was her regular assignment for the 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. shift. It was an older terminal, scheduled for renovation, but constantly delayed due to budget issues. The carpet was worn, the ceiling tiles stained, and the whole place had that particular smell of old buildings, mildew and industrial cleaner, and the accumulated breath of millions of travelers. On the night in question, Jennifer was working through her usual routine in the sea gates when she noticed a man sitting in the far corner of gate C-17. This wasn't unusual in itself. Sometimes passengers with early morning flights arrived extremely early and dozed in the terminal. But something about this man bothered her. He sat perfectly upright, hands on his knees, staring straight ahead at nothing in particular. He wore a business suit that seemed oddly formal, even for business travel, and he was completely motionless, not the natural stillness of someone resting, but an absolute absence of movement. No breathing she could detect, no fidgeting, nothing. "Sir," Jennifer called out as she approached with her cleaning cart. "Terminal opens at 4:30 a.m. You'll need to wait outside until then." The man didn't respond. As Jennifer got closer, details began to register that made her increasingly uncomfortable. His suit, though clean and pressed, was an outdated style, early 1980s perhaps, with wide lapels and a particular cut that hadn't been fashionable in decades. His hair was styled in a dated fashion, and his skin had a peculiar quality, almost waxy in appearance. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Jennifer said more firmly, now standing directly in front of him. That's when she noticed his eyes. They were open, but they didn't move. They didn't blink. They stared forward with the fixed gaze of a mannequin or a corpse. Jennifer felt her heart rate accelerate. She reached for her radio, but before she could call security, the man spoke. "Gate C-17, he said in a monotone voice, never moving his lips more than necessary. "Boarding for Flight 227 to Denver, Gate C-17. "Sir, there are no flights right now. The terminal is closed. "Gate C-17, Flight 227, now boarding all passengers. Gate C-17. He repeated it like a recording, his voice never changing in pitch or tone. Jennifer turned and walked briskly back to the main terminal, calling for security on her radio. 2 guards responded and accompanied her back to Gate C-17. The man was gone. "Where'd he go?" one of the guards asked, scanning the area with his flashlight. "He was right there. I swear to you, he was sitting right there." They searched the area. All the doors were locked from the inside. There was no way in or out of that section of the terminal, except through the main corridor they'd just come from, and they would have seen anyone leaving. The man had simply vanished. One of the guards, an older gentleman named Robert, suddenly went pale. "What did you say the flight number was?" 227, to Denver. Why?" Robert pulled out his phone and did a quick search. When he looked up, his expression was grim. "Flight 227 to Denver crashed on takeoff from this airport in 1982, 43 years ago. Engine failure, hit the runway, burst into flames. Only 4 survivors out of 97 passengers and crew." Jennifer felt cold. "What gate?" Robert looked at his screen again, then up at the gate number on the wall above them. C-17. Over the next several months, Jennifer saw the man 3 more times, always in the same spot, always at the same time, between 1:47 and 1:53 a.m., always wearing the same suit, sitting in the same position, repeating the same boarding announcement for a flight that ended in flames decades ago. She wasn't the only one. Other night shift workers reported similar sightings. Always the same man, the same gate, the same words. Some claimed to see him walk toward the jetway, then disappear. Others claimed to hear multiple voices emanating from Gate C-17 late at night. Announcements, conversations, crying, the sounds of passengers who never reached their destination. The airport administration dismissed these reports as stress, fatigue, or overactive imaginations, but they couldn't explain the cold spots that appeared around Gate C-17. They couldn't explain the photograph taken by a security camera during a maintenance check that showed dozens of translucent figures sitting in the gate area. Men, women, children, all dressed in early 1980s attire, all waiting patiently for a boarding call that would never come. Jennifer still works at the airport, but she refuses assignments in Terminal 3. She's moved to Terminal 1, where the gates are newer, the lights brighter, and the ghosts, if there are any, keep to themselves. But sometimes when she's at home trying to sleep, she still hears it in her mind. Gate C-17, Flight 227 to Denver, now boarding all passengers, Gate C-17. And she wonders how many of them are still waiting, still hoping, still trying to board a flight that departed this world 43 years ago. These are the stories that night shift workers carry with them, stories that never make it into airport incident reports, experiences that can't be explained by security protocols or maintenance schedules. They remind us that some places, especially places where thousands of lives intersect, where emotions run high, where final goodbyes are said and joyful reunions occur, they absorb something of the human experience. And sometimes that absorption leaves an imprint, an echo, a shadow that lingers long after the crowds have gone home. The next time you're in an airport late at night, waiting for a delayed connection or an early morning flight, take a moment to observe your surroundings. Notice how different the terminal feels after dark, how the shadows stretch a little longer, how empty gates seem to hold their breath, and maybe, just maybe, you'll understand why those who work the graveyard shift always walk a little faster through certain corridors, always check over their shoulders, and always make sure they're never completely alone. Because in the spaces between flights, in the hours when the world sleeps and airports hold their breath, the boundary between our world and something else grows thin, and those who travel between worlds, whether they know they're doing it or not, sometimes forget to leave when the sun comes up. This is Mr. Shadow's stories, your guide through the darkness. If these tales have unsettled you, if they've made you question what lurks in the empty spaces of our world, then I've done my job. But this is merely the beginning. Countless stories are waiting in the shadows, stories from places you visit every day, stories from people you pass on the street, stories that are happening right now in the darkness while you sleep.
Follow this channel for more true horror stories from the places you thought were safe. Subscribe and let the shadows speak to you each week. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a journey into the unknown. And remember, the darkness is always watching, the shadows are always listening, and the stories are always waiting to be told. Until next time, dear viewers, keep your lights on, lock your doors, and whatever you do, if you find yourself in an empty airport terminal late at night and you see someone sitting alone in the shadows, someone who doesn't quite belong, don't approach them, don't speak to them, and whatever you do, don't ask them where they're going, because some passengers have been traveling far longer than you could possibly imagine, and their destination is nowhere you'd ever want to follow. Good night, sleep well, and remember, I'll be here, waiting in the shadows, with more stories that will keep you awake. This is Mr. Shadow's Stories, signing off.